let's face it, Harry's never had to do a day's work in his life, as you and I would define a day's work, and most people listening. He's that lucky, he's that privileged. And what goes with the privilege is this enormous interest by the public in every aspect of their lives.
Hi, all. Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome back to Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Goldberg KC, one of the UK's most respected criminal defense lawyers. Over the course of his career, he's defended more than 100 murder cases and represented a number of high-profile clients. He now co-hosts I Rest My Case. Now, this is a hard-hitting true crime podcast that digs into some of the world's most fascinating cases, alongside Dean Strang, who I know you're familiar with, best known for his role as a key defense attorney for Stephen Avery in the Netflix series Making a Murderer. I Rest My Case is available wherever you listen to podcasts now. Jonathan, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And I love your podcast.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you, Kinsey.
Now, the one that I, of course, fell in love with and inspired this conversation is you did an unbelievable deep dive of some of Prince Harry's legal drama. And it's so funny because you tell this story about how we hadn't seen really a royal take the stand in how since 18 something, but it feels like thanks to Prince Harry, we're seeing royals in the High Court much more often, huh?
Well, it's really unprecedented, except once, which is that in 1891, in an enormous scandal at the time, wonderful case called the Royal Baccarat Scandal. In those days, gambling, incredibly, was illegal in the United Kingdom. But of course, the royal family and the aristocracy generally gambled to their heart's content at these wonderful country house weekend parties, like you see now in Downton Abbey, pretty accurately portrayed. And the Prince of Wales, who was the son of Queen Victoria and later became King Edward VII, and he was quite a playboy, to put it kindly. And he was gambling at the Baccarat table at a country house weekend in Yorkshire. And he accused another player who was a high-ranking colonel in the army, in a wonderful regiment, the Scots Guards. He accused him of cheating. And this was just an incredible scandal. And somebody threw the card table over. And it ended with them getting this guy to sign a document on the spot saying he would never play cards again, and then they wouldn't ruin him in high society. But somebody leaked it. So this army officer felt he had no option but to sue for defamation. And he subpoenaed the Prince of Wales to be a witness. So the Prince of Wales had no choice but to come. And I can't tell you, this was the great scandal of the decade in about 1891. So that was the only previous time that a royal gave evidence. And of course, the judge told the jury, how can you possibly disbelieve this upstanding member of the royal family? And the jury took 7 minutes to find against the army officer, considered one of the most biased summing ups that there have ever been in an English trial by the then Lord Chief Justice. So you have to wait until Harry in 2023 gave evidence against the Mirror Group in a case that he won, of course, and won quite resoundingly, for breach of his privacy, because the rule has always been, as you well know, in the British royal family, never complain, never explain. And of course, the great exponent of that was the late Queen Elizabeth, Harry's grandma. And she must be not turning in her grave, but spinning in her grave if she could see what's going on now.
You talk about how Harry has really great counsel, because sometimes he goes all in and sometimes he pumps the brakes and he realizes that there's more to lose in a scenario. Does he stick with the same counsel? Have you noticed that he continues to work with the same people? Is he confident in them, or is it based on each one of these individual cases that he works with new people?
Well, he has a barrister called David Sherborne, who I reckon is a very bright boy, very dynamic. And he wasn't terribly well known until apparently he met Harry at a party in the south of France, hosted by Elton John and his husband, David Furnish. What do you know? And Elton John sort of made the marriage between these two, and Harry complained to him of all the breaches of privacy by the press. And this boy apparently said, well, come to me, I can advise you and we can do something about this. And by heavens, it's led to a long journey. And I think Sherborne is very clever. He knows when to fight and he knows when to settle. And he even knows when to drop hands. And there's been examples of that too in this, I don't know, it's now a 5-6 year saga. It's a crusade, as you might call it, of Harry's litigation against the English press, determined to establish that they're not allowed to pry into his private life the way they've been doing ever since Diana died, at least.
And that's so interesting to me because I think, having studied so much about Diana's life, that there was a real pivot from the British press after the loss of Diana. I mean, I know that they let the boys go off and go to school and didn't hassle the boys when they went to university. But with Harry, he's a unique case because he did put on a Nazi costume. Harry, in my opinion, is the perpetual victim, and he attracts a lot of the negative attention he receives himself. Am I right in my understanding that there was a positive shift in the media after the death of Diana? They gave the family a little bit of space.
Yes, I think definitely that for a time, everyone in the country, really, I mean, even somebody as, how shall we put it, experienced and cynical as me as a trial lawyer, and I went out into the street to pay my respects as her coffin drove past. It went, halfway across the country, this black hearse in a cortege, and even I did it. And everyone was doing it. It was an extraordinary time. And for, I think, a year or two after that, the press did leave the boys alone, no question about it. And there were one or two staged photographic shoots, for example, when the now King Charles, when Prince Charles would take them skiing in Switzerland, and there'd be a photographic shoot at the beginning of the holiday, but then they would leave them completely alone to ski. But of course, then Harry grew up and William grew up, and things and of course, Harry, since his engagement and marriage to Meghan, who is, in my view, the great publicist of all time. I mean, you have to admire Meghan, a girl who's pulled herself by her bootstraps up from absolutely nothing. And look at her today. I mean, she is a brilliant manipulator of publicity and the press. So I think he's going home every day to a masterclass from her. And I've no doubt she is the person advising him most closely. So really, he's brought on himself, as you've indicated, so much of the publicity of which he complains. Just take as an example the book called Spare that he was paid apparently £20 million for, and amongst many other gobsmacking admissions there, he took drugs when he was young, and his girlfriends and terrible things that his relatives in the royal family were doing and briefing against him. I mean, he absolutely tears the veil off everything.
Jonathan, if we were closer, we'd talk about the frozen Todger, but this is our first face-to-face meeting. So we'll save that for the next conversation.
So when it suits him, and he's getting good press as such a charitable humanitarian and a wonderful family man and all the rest of it, and Oprah Winfrey gushing over him and all the rest of it, when it suits both of them, they court publicity. But the moment it turns a bit sour, of course, they hate publicity and they hate the press. It's really quite hypocritical.
It is. I totally agree with you. Let's talk wellness without the scare tactics. Life is busy. Mornings start fast. Coffee is essential, and routines need to work, not complicate things. People want products that support how they live now, because real beauty is about supporting what keeps you strong, radiant, and feeling your best. That's where Native Path Collagen comes in. No, this is not a trendy, overhyped beauty product. This is the real deal. It contains type 1 and type 3 collagen, which makes up roughly 90% of the collagen found in the the human body. These are the building blocks that support skin, hair, and joint health. Native Path helps support those systems. One single ingredient, no fillers, no nonsense, just high quality collagen. Each morning, one scoop can be mixed into your coffee or your favorite beverage. It dissolves easily, has no taste, and fits seamlessly into your everyday routine. Many people report stronger hair, smoother, more hydrated skin, and less joint stiffness, especially in the mornings. Try it for yourself. Visit getnativepath.com/unfiltered to take advantage of a special offer today. Here comes the spelling test. Ready? It's Get, G-E-T, native, N-A-T-I-V-E, path, PATH.com/unfiltered for a special bundle deal at a fraction of the retail price, backed by a risk-free 365-day guarantee. If you want to look good, feel good, and actually support your body instead of just hoping your moisturizer is magic, Native Path is where you start. GetNativePath.com/unfiltered. Let's talk about Harry taking the stand on Wednesday. Now, it's my understanding that we did not expect him to take the stand until Thursday, and his legal team accused Associated Newspapers attorneys of deliberately trying to ambush him with this premature testimony. And that tension set the tone for a pretty combative day in court. Was that fair of Harry's team to feel unprepared, or could that happen at any time with any case?
Kinsey, there's so much gamesmanship, goes on in any trial. We lawyers are very good at it, and we do it, and we love it, and then we deny that we're doing it. In any trial, but particularly a trial that's being played out under the relentless glare of the world's TV and press, as this one is. So, Harry's team were accusing the other team of giving only a very short opening speech, shorter than the day that was expected, which meant that Harry had to take the witness stand the day before he had anticipated. But I think it's complete performative nonsense, to be honest with you, because the one thing I can assure you is that although, again, lawyers pretend it doesn't happen, Harry will have been rehearsed to the nth degree. Be assured that there was nothing in Harry's testimony that came as a surprise to his team and that wasn't, anticipated and rehearsed again and again in the days leading up to this trial. So they weren't really taken aback at all. They were just pretending. Personal view, but I'm pretty experienced in what I'm telling you.
I agree. Yeah. Let's keep that. I'm going to ask you about that again at the very end, and you probably know what question I'm talking about. But I love the idea of every moment's rehearsed. He knew exactly what he was going to say. What I thought was so great about A&L's defense, just in the conversation we heard between Harry and the defense attorney, was that they are very confident that everyone that Harry's accusing of spying on him in some way could go back and tell them exactly who their source was and how they secured that interview or how they secured the piece of information they had. It felt like, and I know that they haven't been asked to provide anything tangible, but it did feel like they were so confident in their argument, and Harry didn't provide any tangible evidence. He couldn't show you a bug he found in his car or some sort of stalking software on his phone. It was just, I was much more confident in A&L's performance that day than Harry's. Am I just biased? Do I just not like Harry?
No, you're not biased, but if you'll allow me to say so, you're being premature.
Yeah.
Because, this trial is going to last 6 or 7 or 8 weeks, and then you're going to have to wait another month or two for the judge to write his judgment. And it's a cliffhanger. Even somebody as experienced as an observer of trials in England as myself, I'm telling you, I can't call this one because you have not heard the A&L witnesses. And on paper, supposedly, they're going to call all the relevant journalists to say, oh, we got our information from legitimate sources, be it leaky friends in his social circle, or be it somebody at the airline who called us and told us he was on the plane, or whatever it might, or his girlfriend was, all this sort of stuff. And of course, it's a very odd thing, you know. I'm old enough to remember when all this sort of stuff by the press was called great investigative journalism.
Yeah.
I mean, think of Bernstein and Woodward in Watergate, just as an example. I mean, you know, they won Pulitzer Prizes for doing what the English press are now being called terrible names by Harry for doing. But the pendulum has swung. The law has changed since the early 2000s in Britain, and in particular, one judge called Mr. Justice Eady, who took it upon himself to create a law of privacy, and the higher courts went along with it. And so stuff that would have been perfectly legitimate, let's say in the 90s, suddenly became taboo in the 2000s. So, you know, it's quite possible, as indeed happened with a different judge against the Mirror Group of newspapers when Harry last gave evidence in 2023. And they found for Harry and gave him big damages and enormous legal costs because, you know, his phone had been hacked or bugged, whatever you want to call it, this kind of stuff. Right. So we're going to have to wait and see if these journalists are credible in saying they didn't need to bug his phone or hack or do anything bad that they shouldn't have done, or blag. That's when you pretend, I don't know, you phone the registrar of Elizabeth Hurley's, because of course, don't forget, she's one of 7 complainants. We've only heard from Harry, but there's another 6 coming, and she's just started her evidence, or perhaps she's just finished it. But you've got another, you know, 5 or 6 coming, well-known celebrities. They're all telling their stories of how terribly treated they were by the press. But you've actually got 2 defenses by ANL, the second of which I don't think the public has quite cottoned on to yet. You've got a technical legal defense, and it may prove stronger than sort of the factual defense that's catching all the headlines. And the technical legal defense is this, that in Britain, you're only allowed 6 years from the date you first know you've been defamed or your privacy has been invaded. You've got to bring your case. You've got to issue your writ, if you like, within 6 years. And they didn't, by and large. They did it after. And they're all saying, because it's only later that they discovered. So they're within the 6 years when they first discovered, so many years after these various articles were written. But the newspaper is saying, no, we've got some emails and so on that show that you knew you had a case within the first 6 years, not now. You're pretending that you only learned later. And I think there's some quite exciting evidence coming to suggest that quite a few porkies may have been told by certain celebrities on when they first realized they actually had a case. And there seems to have been, you know, secret meetings between some of them and their lawyers and this sort of stuff. And notes have surfaced made by a young lawyer present at 1 or 2 of these meetings that suggest they did know, some of them, that they had a case before they're now saying they did discover it for the first time. So that's going to get exciting. Now, that technical legal defense could be a winner. You could find the judge saying, well, I agree, they hacked and they bugged and they did all sorts of terrible things to get their stories. But some of these celebrities are outside the 6 years, so sorry, I can't help. That could happen. So this really is a cliffhanger, quite apart from the fact, as you've said, that the journalists, so we're told by the opening speech of the newspaper group, the journalists are all coming to show where they legitimately got their information from without having to use improper means. Well, could be the journalists are telling porkies as well. It's not exactly been unknown in the history of the world. And it's going to be all very interesting. So what I'm saying is you've only seen Act 1 of this drama. I'm telling you, there's another 4 full acts to follow. Don't put your money yet on which side is going to win. If you ask me who is going to win, I would say my money would be on Harry, actually, and some of the others. I say some because one doesn't know yet the stories of all 7 of them. But my money would be on Harry, but at the moment, but it's pretty marginal. There's got to be a reason why this newspaper group, instead of settling as others have done, are fighting this all the way. They've got to know something we don't yet know, and think they can get away with it. And so hold your horses before you place a bet or before you assume who's going to win this one.
Would the journalists have to give up their actual sources, or could they just talk in a vague term? Because I know one of the girls and I trust her. And she said, yeah, I used to hang out with Harry and his friends. I used to hang out with them. And Harry said on the stand that he knew of her, but he did not remember her being around in his circle. But she told me this long before we knew about this lawsuit. And I trust that she was in his circle of friends.
Yes, absolutely. There's going to be some hijinks yet to come, because the law is quite complicated in England on this as to whether a journalist does have to name the sources. And there's going to be a lot of legal argument yet to come on this. And it's going to have to be decided by the judge, I would guess, on a case-by-case, witness-by-witness, fact-by-fact basis. So will they have to? I suspect what you'll get is this, that you'll get a journalist saying, well, I was at the party and X told me, because X is close to the court and perhaps works, as a servant at the palace, whatever it might be. And X told me that Harry was about to take his girlfriend, Chelsea Davy, for a dirty weekend in whatever wonderful hotel in Malawi it might be, which Harry is now complaining about as being a gross breach of his privacy. But, of course, the next question by Mr. Sherborne, Harry's lawyer, is going to be, name that source. I think the journalist is probably going to say, sorry, I can't. It's against every basic rule of journalism. It would offend my professional ethics. I suspect that's going to happen. And the judge is then going to have to rule, does he order the journalist to provide the information? He could rule that. Wow. And he could even threaten the witness with going to prison for contempt of court if they fail to answer. That's the sanction a court has. But will the judge go that far? Will the witness, the journalist in question, refuse to name the source? Maybe the journalist will. Maybe they'll have had the permission of whoever it may now be, who now feels free to say, yes, I did. Go to hell, Harry. Yeah. This is fascinating stuff, but we don't yet know, Kinsey. We've got to wait and see.
I love it. I love it. All right. So the judge had to step in repeatedly while Harry was giving evidence, reminding him that he was there to answer questions, not argue with counsel. I heard Harry described as defensive and hostile sometimes. I was surprised that it's the actual judge that makes the decision. There's no jury involved. So you don't want to get on the judge's nerves, right? You don't want to have to be reprimanded more than once.
No, that's absolutely right. But it's not unusual, to be honest with you. As a judge, I've sat as a judge and I've done it myself, and it's not at all unusual for a judge to say to a witness who's rambling on, please answer the question. Please don't try to be your own barrister. You've got an excellent barrister, Mr. Sherburne. He'll make all the arguments to me. You just answer the questions factually and low-key. That's all I want to hear. So that's very common in all cases, actually. But in England, you're quite right that whereas in America, a case like this would definitely be tried, or almost certainly in most states, as Dean Strang tells me, not all the states are the same, but it would probably be tried by a jury. They scrapped that in England several decades ago. We basically do not have juries, except in very rare exceptions, which I needn't go into now. We don't have juries at all in civil cases. They're all now judge only. It's much quicker, it's much cheaper for the state, obviously, because jury trial is terribly expensive. There's nothing more expensive than organizing 12 people and their lives and having to adjourn every time one of them has a hospital appointment and this sort of thing, which is what goes on with jury trial. It's a wonderful mode of trial, but it's incredibly slow and incredibly expensive. So England, with its rickety economy, is now even talking about scrapping juries in many criminal cases. But certainly in civil, they're gone. It is a judge alone. Obviously, it's a wise witness or a wise claimant or defendant who tries to stay on the right side of the judge. But this particular judge, very good, very clever, very experienced. I can tell you they've gone for one of the high-powered ones. And when he gently told Harry to, stop being a revivalist preacher and leave that to his counsel and just answer the questions, I don't think the judge has taken against him just for that. No, it's a common sort of thing for judges to do.
Well, that's good to hear. I just imagine, if I'm being honest with you, 24/7 litigation going on in Harry and Meghan's house. Maybe they've watched too many episodes of Suits, but I just think these two rile each other up. And that was my visual, knowing that the judge is saying, no, sit, this is not your role. This is not your role. You just need to sit this one out. I guess I was just imagining Harry and Meghan role playing at home and Harry trying to get every single little detail out and trying to force his narrative.
I'll bet you're right. I mean, isn't it a pity that we don't have a fly on the wall in Montecito? But I'll bet you're right, because I somehow guess that the person who is the power behind the throne is her, and that this hasn't been going on just because he's on a crusade. She's on a crusade too. And I'll bet they're winding each other up every moment of every working day. There's something really, it needs a Shakespeare, doesn't it, to write a play about this. It's pretty incredible. Two incredibly privileged, incredibly rich, talented, beautiful, top of the world celebrities. And this is what they're spending their time on. There's something a bit sick about it, isn't there?
I know.
Edward VIII, the only previous precedent I can give you would be Edward VIII, who famously abdicated his throne for the woman he loved, Wallis Simpson, also an American who pulled herself up by her bootstraps, let's say.
Also divorced.
Yes. Really, the comparisons are really very interesting. Obviously, different times, different social attitudes, but there are many analogies between the two situations. But at least once he abdicated and they floated around Europe from one sort of rich watering hole to another, living in luxury, at least one can say that they didn't start suing everybody in sight, every newspaper, for writing articles about them. They also adopted the never complain, never explain royal family mantra. But Harry and Meghan, oh boy, they've broken the mold. They have really thrown the toys out of the pram.
Yeah, always complain, always explain, I think is their motto. Let's talk about never complain, never explain, because Harry brings this up on the stand in the witness box and says he was conditioned by that policy and felt he had no alternative but to accept it. Yet he contradicts himself a few minutes later and said that complaining often makes matters worse. To your point, what you were just saying, that is a lesson many would argue he has learned the hard way, that complaining can make things worse. But it's been pretty lucrative for him in the form of litigation.
Well, the funny thing about bringing cases like this in England, as compared with your country, is that English damages, the amounts awarded, are really ludicrously small by American standards. So when, for example, Harry won his last round against a different newspaper group, Mirror Group newspapers in 23, after a long trial at which he gave evidence bitterly contested, just like this one is going to be, and he won. And he won big by English standards. And what did he get? The princely sum of £140,000 in damages. So you would say, not worth getting out of bed for. In America, you'd expect millions, I think. But what it's all really about is the legal costs. So although those were his actual damages, the estimate is that his lawyers made over, many millions of pounds, that the total bill would have been at least £10 million going to the lawyers and their expert witnesses and, all the people that are behind the lawyers. So it's like a casino in which you're gambling over the legal costs in England at the end of the day, because we have a rule that you don't have in America, which is the winner gets his costs from the loser. The loser, it's called the English rule. The loser always has to pay everybody's costs, his own and the other side. And these can be phenomenal. So as I say, an estimate of £10 million for the costs that the Mirror Group has had to pay, even though they're only having to pay £140,000 damages. Now, if Harry wins, and if any of the other celebrities win, expect the same to happen in this case. Fairly modest damages awarded to them, but the principle being established that the newspaper has paid badly, and then Harry will crow about that, of course, endlessly. Probably write another book about it, won't he? Or somebody will write it on his behalf, so we can guess who. And the costs will be enormous this time. I'm told that the costs could be 40, 50 million pounds, because it's gone on so long and it's involved so much more work on both sides. So that's what it's really about, you know, for the lawyers, at least. And he's not really in this for the money. I think one has to say that the one thing you can't accuse him of is bringing this 5-6 year crusade against the press for money. No. He is fighting for principle. Oh God, do I love a client who says I'm fighting for principle? You know, any lawyer adores a client who says that. You can imagine. Money's no object. I'm fighting for principle, which is his situation, because he's an enormously rich man. Let's not forget, both of them are enormously rich people. Yes. They've made so much money out of their brand, and good luck to them. They've been very clever about it. So he is fighting for principle. He wants to clean up the British press. He wants to show that he's been mistreated and, you know, bugged and spied upon since he was a young kid and all the rest of it. And he's had a dog's life because of this, and his wife's life has been ruined. It's all very odd because, of course, none of the 14 articles that he's bringing the case about, that he's suing about, these articles in the press, none of them appeared in the press after he met Meghan. They were all from long before he met Meghan in 2016. But nonetheless, you know, he says her life has been ruined, and who are we to doubt it?
I mean, he probably just felt obligated to bring her up because he just spent a few hours talking about ex-girlfriends, and she knew he was he knew she was off in another country, live scrolling, just listening to him reminisce about having his heart broken by these women and how the newspapers ruined his life. But yeah, you're right.
Well, aren't you clever? It takes a woman to spot that. I hadn't spotted that, and I'll bet you're right.
But Harry says he wants to, this is him slaying dragons. So you are absolutely right that he feels like this is on principle, and he just wants to hold, according to him, he wants to hold people accountable. But for the people that read Spare and watched the Netflix series and the Oprah Winfrey interview, we kind of sit back and think the audacity when you have monetized some of your family's secrets without their permission, publishing private text messages between Catherine and Meghan Markle in Spare, that's totally unacceptable. But we'll move on. We'll allow him to have his martyr moment. At one point, Harry accused the media of intentionally trying to push him towards drugs and alcohol to sell newspapers. That's a pretty big accusation. He cited coverage from 2005 during his relationship with Chelsea Davy, saying it left him paranoid beyond belief. Is that claim difficult to reconcile when he does talk openly about at least drugs in his book and almost promotes ayahuasca use as a therapy in some of his book promotion, gloats about drugs at Courtney Cox's house? It's like, was the Daily Mail there when you were talking to a trash can because you were so high on mushrooms?
Kinsey, it all goes back, doesn't it, to what we were saying earlier, the hypocrisy of all this. These people live on the oxygen of publicity when it suits them, when it's pushing their brand, when it's showing the world what lovely people they really are. But despite the mask of, behind the mask of celebrity, they are they're just like you and me, you know, they're ordinary good people, and all they think about is helping others less fortunate than themselves. So when this is the message, of course, you can't get enough publicity. But the moment the message may be more intrusive and more connected with their private life, in quotation marks, of course, it's terrible and shouldn't be allowed to be done. So I remember that when Meghan first came to England and was introduced to the British public, you know, they had a honeymoon period, and it lasted until, I would say, a year after the marriage. So they had 2 or 3 years of absolute adoration from the British public, and indeed the press. They could do no wrong. They were the golden couple. They were so popular. And all this stuff about people have been racist against her. I think it's so unfair and untrue, because I, as I say, remember this honeymoon period of a couple of years where they absolutely eclipsed our great old queen. They eclipsed his elder brother and his very nice wife, who has not set a foot wrong in my book since she was first introduced to the public. I mean, that girl is quiet and nice and good, and you know, is not a publicity hound. But back to Meghan. But so they really had, they blew it, Kinsey. They blew it by the way they turned against the royal family and his own brother and his own father. They really blew it, and now they complain that the press would want to expose that he wasn't always as nice as he was saying he was, and that she wasn't. So again, there's a lot of people who would say, far be it from me to give an opinion, but there's a lot of people that would say he's a spoiled brat.
Yeah. Yes, my audience is agreeing with you right now. I can assure you of that. Let me ask you about this. It sounds to me like you're a monarchist. Harry argued that reports on his romantic relationship in the press, that was not of public interest. Do you think that that's debatable, given the fact that he holds a place in the line of succession? Is it of public interest if you want to know who could be your queen one day?
Well, it goes back to what the system of government is. I mean, in Britain, and it's worked very well for a long time. I mean, let's face it, no system of government is perfect. It's just the least worst that we're looking for. That's what Churchill said about democracy. It's the least worst system. Well, I would say that about royalty. It's the least worst system that you can think of, and it's worked very well in England. And by and large, they have been very popular for so many centuries. It's the governments that have been terrible in England, especially in the last 20 years, not the royal family at all, with the exception of Harry and Meghan. So, what was your question again? I forgot the question. We'll have to edit that one out.
Do you think that it's because Harry's arguing that it's not public interest who he dates, but who he ends up with is actually very important to the way that your culture works?
Oh, of course it's public interest. If you have a royal family, then everything they do is public interest. Of course it is. I mean, that goes with the job, and it goes with the luxury that the job confers and prestige. And let's face it, Harry's never had to do a day's work in his life, as you and I would define a day's work, and most people listening. He's that lucky, he's that privileged. And what goes with the privilege is this enormous interest by the public in every aspect of their lives. You know, what clothes they're wearing, what fashions they're promoting, what football matches they're going to, everything about. That's what it is. But in fairness, I mean, you know, President Trump has a bruise on his hand. Everyone wants to know why. So it goes with being any public figure, doesn't it? I mean, George Clooney has to put up with it, just as another example, a film star. It goes with the territory. But who is complaining in the way Harry is, as though you know, it's so terrible for him what everyone else has to put up with as part of the privilege that they enjoy?
If you're the judge, are you listening to some of these statements and writing them down? How do you think the judge is handling some of these claims? Like when Harry says, "I think they were trying to drive me to drink," is the judge going, trying to drive him to drink? How
Oh,
is the
yes.
judge? Okay. Yeah,
The
interesting.
judge is noting everything down. He's writing it all down in his notebook, and he's probably got a daily transcript. He probably doesn't even need to write it down in his notebook because he's probably ordered in a big case like this a daily official transcript of every word that's being spoken. And he can study it later at his leisure before writing his judgment, which is, by the way, an enormous intellectual task. I've, in my own career, as I say, sat part-time as a judge, which is part of the English system. They call us recorders and allow us to sit a month or two a year, and we have all the powers of a judge. And the idea is they're sort of grooming to see whether we might be interested in being a full-time judge and whether they might be interested in us. I never was interested in being a full-time judge, but that's another story. So I enjoyed being a recorder. And so you put a lot of work and effort into writing these judgments. It may be, in this case, I don't know, it'll be 100-page judgment, let's say, most likely, and it may be a lot more. Because this is going to have an awful lot of contested evidence. So it may be 200-300 pages even. And it takes days and weeks to get it right. And you're worrying over every word, especially when you know this is going to be read all over the world. And your own prestige and that of the British legal system is also on trial here. So you work very hard to get it right. And as I said, this happens to be an extremely good judge, very clever man. So he is taking notice of everything, and he's not reacting. He's trying to keep a poker face, by and large. There may be the very odd dry joke, and there may be the odd interjection, like the one you mentioned when he gently chided Harry for being too argumentative and not sufficiently factual in his answers. But he's listening to everything, he's noting everything, but don't expect him to react in court, because he won't. And secondly, wait till the judgment. If it's important, it will be there. If he thinks it's trivial, he'll leave it out. And I suspect that this kind of performative nonsense about, they were driving him to alcohol, drink, drugs, and loose women. I mean, it's so laughable, really, isn't it? I don't expect he's going to be impressed by that particular line, which doesn't mean to say Harry won't win for better reasons. But that particular line, when you analyze it, how can you drive anyone to drink and drugs and all the rest of it? How can the press drive somebody? I mean, it's his own choice to have dressed up in the Nazi uniform as a kid and to have taken cannabis and
Naked in
mushrooms
Vegas, naked in Las Vegas. We all saw
and
those
naked
pictures.
in Vegas. And let's say, whereas you or I, well, I'm the British citizen here, not you, but if I had written a book describing my drugs use, for which I was handsomely paid by my publisher, I would no longer be admitted to America. I couldn't get a visa to enter America. Simple as that. I have many clients who've done less things than that, and they have been denied access to America. American immigration is very tough on not allowing people in who've admitted criminal conduct. It is criminal conduct in this country, at least, to take these drugs. They haven't yet been legalized. And so has it stopped him, traveling? No, it hasn't. So again, it's all part of the, when it suits me, I complain. And when it doesn't suit me, I don't complain. There's a lot of performative nonsense here that we have to strip away in order to get at the truth, I think.
What a great point about how he brags about drugs when he's trying to look cool in his book. I was hanging out with the cast of Friends, but when he wants sympathy from the court, he says, "Oh my gosh, you don't even know. They had me on the verge." Well, let's talk about sympathy from the court, because he becomes visibly upset during his testimony towards the end when speaking about Meghan Markle, telling the court that the media coverage had made his wife's life an absolute misery. And this is the point I wanted to come back to when you were like, every moment is rehearsed. They know exactly what he's going to say, because I would assume that this was a moment that Harry and his attorneys discussed because they wanted some sort of emotional reaction, or they knew that this would hijack every headline on Wednesday. They knew that this would be the only headline to come out of the courtroom, and it would tug at people's heartstrings, maybe change some public perception around this couple. But to your point, how is that relevant to this case? Because it ends at 2013. Harry doesn't even meet Meghan till 2016. So is he just trying to guilt the judge into feeling sorry for him and his family?
Kinsey, I'm getting the impression you're almost as big a cynic as I am. Um, I, when I say that every question has been rehearsed, I don't mean to say that the legal team have necessarily said, right, when they ask you about this, you cry, Harry.
Yeah.
But what they will have said, I suspect, and certainly what I've said to many clients, is if you feel emotional and if a particular question causes you to feel like you're going to cry, don't hold back. Let it loose. It will only show the court what an honest human being you are and how genuine you are in your emotions. So that advice, well, I'm sure have been given. And he was given the opportunity by the very clever barrister David Sherborne when he re-examined him, and he was asked questions that were pretty much designed to provoke that sort of reaction. And Harry gave you that sort of reaction. And of course, you then got it again the next day with the same barrister and Elizabeth Hurley. And of course, she broke down in tears, and they had to comfort her. And was it Harry, I think, put his arm in court round Hurley's son, who was there. And Hurley's complaint is, of course, that the press somehow discovered the fact that the father was a billionaire called Stephen Bink, who eventually committed suicide. Anyway, he'd been denying paternity, and the press discovered the fact that he was the father, and he was registered on the birth certificate and so on in California. So when she was describing this, she broke down in tears. Well, this is a woman who's been a very good actress all her life. She's used to faking it.
Yeah, I was going to say she's used to faking it because she's currently with Billy Ray Cyrus, but it's not what I would consider top of the line when it comes to celebrity status. So that's
No.
very interesting. I didn't realize that she also had one of those moments as well today. So thank
Oh
you for
yes.
sharing
I
that with me.
suspect you'll be seeing a lot more such moments from a lot more of these seven plaintiffs. Telling the world how terrible it is to have your life exposed.
And the judge might sympathize with, or I shouldn't use the word sympathize. The judge might side with one, but not another. Like the judge might.
That could happen. Yes,
Yeah.
he could.
Wow.
He could definitely believe one of the seven and not others, and so on and so forth. He could. That's the whole purpose of having a trial. It gives you the opportunity as a judge, or indeed a jury in other cases, to make these conclusions and decide who's telling the truth and who isn't. And there's going to have to be a lot of that in this case, with the journalists stacking up to give one version and Harry and the other six giving another version of how these revelations came to light in the various press articles. But a judge is, again, pretty cynical. It's like you and me in our different careers. We've had to look behind people's protestations and say, oh, come on, is there some flannel going on here, as there usually is? And this judge is pretty hard bitten. He's not going to be easily flanneled by this sort of theatricals, I can tell you.
That's so funny. Well, after Elizabeth Hurley wrapped up her testimony, Prince Harry was spotted kicking around Parliament, and maybe I am just a little paranoid, but I wonder if Harry would be trying to talk to anybody or trying to influence at all Ravik's next decision on whether or not he and his family are given automatic police protection when he comes back to the UK. He currently has, in my opinion, this great offer where he just has to give them 28, 30 days notice, and they will, and his itinerary, and they will determine whether or not they need to provide the type of protection he's asking for, which is armed security. I just think he hates not having what his brother has and doesn't like having to give people his schedule. And that's why this is such an infuriating situation for him. But 9 times out of 10, he's given the security he wants when he comes over there. Do you think that he might be trying to, I don't know, influence that in any way while he's over there?
Well, this is one of the cases that Harry lost, and lost big. And you'll recall that he sued the Home Office, part of the British government.
And his father, correct? Isn't this also suing?
No, he didn't sue his father. He made very rude remarks after he lost the case in court. He then went on the warpath and gave an hour's interview in which he was berating his father because Daddy, had he used his influence and pulled his strings, could have got me this protection, and I could have won. But Daddy just, left me hanging in space and didn't bother to help me. Well, this is the same Daddy that he hasn't visited, with cancer and so on in all these years, and that he's fallen out with and never listened to. He was very much a wayward child. But anyway, this is yet another example of wanting to have it both ways, as many people would see it. So he sued the Home Office, whose committee RAVIC is. And RAVIC is a committee, not all your listeners may know yet, but it's a committee of the great and good in British security and intelligence, who decide what protection needs to be given to not just the royal family, but really to government ministers and any important people, shall we say, who are likely to require protection. And RAVIC decides what level and how constant and how many personnel need to be involved. And they're really very professional. And in Harry's case, they were saying, look, you're no longer a member of the royal family since you chose in 2020 to go to California. You don't have royal duties anymore. You say you want to come back from time to time to Great Britain. Fair enough. When you do, give us your dates, tell us in broad terms where you're going to be, and we'll give you a bespoke plan of action. We'll fit the necessary security to the circumstances that they're going to be. So we're not going to leave you without protection. Of course not. Could be nothing. It would be unimaginable, wouldn't it, if there were an attack on Harry or Meghan or the children when they were visiting Britain because sufficient security hadn't been given. It's inconceivable that the government would want to risk that. So what they were offering, what RAVIC were offering, was bespoke security each time you come. And most of us will say, by God, that's fair enough. But Harry again made a great big fuss. He said, look, I'll even pay myself. And they said, look, it's not a question of paying the police and armed security and private security that will be in attendance, and people won't even know that you're being watched by plainclothes people. It's not we're not mercenaries. We're not for hire, unfortunately. We're professional police and security agents and so forth, and indeed secret agents. But trust us, you'll be okay. But you don't need to pay, but leave it to us as to what level of security you need. Well, none of that was good enough for Harry. And he took this all the way to the Court of Appeal in Britain. He lost before the judge. And he took it all the way to the Court of Appeal, who basically were nice to him in their judgments, I thought, insofar as they said, and these were really the top judges in Britain sitting in the Court of Appeal, and they said, look, we realize you're sincere in your complaint. We're not saying you're pretending. We realize you've got a real bee in your bonnet about this, but unfortunately that doesn't give you a legal case. Many people come to these courts who've wound themselves up to think that they're being persecuted, but they're not always right. And that's basically what they said to him, that he had not been unfairly treated by RAVIC. So you're suggesting that because he's been seen in Parliament, and I read it was to have a chat with Lady Doreen Lawrence, who's another of the seven.
Yeah.
But you're thinking it might be connected with. I think he's lost with Ravek, and I think he's had to come to terms with what they've offered him, and he's had to accept it. And it's
Really?
really
So
not about.
they did recently say that they were reevaluating, and we would find this is after Harry went to Ukraine with Yvette Cooper. He went to Ukraine with Yvette Cooper and had a private meeting with Yvette Cooper, and then came back to the States and wrote somebody in Keir Starmer's administration begging them to reevaluate this again. And it's my understanding that Ravik is within this month reevaluating their decision. So do you think, because you read the last decision like word for word, do you think that they will stay confidently in that direction? It sounds like you do. I don't know what much has changed except Harry having those private meetings with Yvette Cooper and having access to a different party, perhaps the Tory party. Maybe I don't understand why the Labour Party would be more forgiving towards Prince Harry, except it just seems like a hot mess over there in general. But
tell you something funny, that you would imagine that historically it would be the conservative politicians who would kowtow to the royal family and, grovel to them. But historically, it's been the Labour Party has always kowtowed to the royal family and not the Conservatives. Very strange fact, but it's true.
Yeah.
The Labour Party, they're fawn over. They can't wait to have an audience with the royals, by and large. Strange sort of something to do with the class system or the inverted snobbery in Britain. Although I think actually, no, it may be simpler. That ordinary working people have always been the greatest supporters of the royal family. So maybe that's the reason that Labour politicians always kowtow to the royal family.
That could be it, yeah.
One thing I'm sure of is Harry won't be going back to court. He's lost, and he's lost big, and he's had his wrists slapped by the courts on the Ravek business. So he's not going back to the courts. But if you're asking me, may Yvette Cooper, the new Home Secretary, or the Home Secretary, now Foreign Secretary actually in Britain, may she have been giving him a better deal that the courts wouldn't? Well, of course that's possible, because this particular Labour government under the ghastly Prime Minister we have, Keir Starmer, are so desperate to get a vote anywhere, and they're so likely to be thrown out the moment the electorate get the chance, and they know it, of course, that it wouldn't surprise me if they thought Harry was popular and would get a few votes if they gave him greater security, they would do it. I think it might be a miscalculation, because I think ordinary people in Britain are far less tolerant of Harry and Meghan now. As I say, they feel they've been let down, they feel they've been deceived by Harry and Meghan, and the honeymoon is well and truly over. So I think, in fact, it's ordinary people that wouldn't want some deal to be done behind the scenes. And I think it's in America that you people are so much more tolerant of Harry and Meghan and their life in Montecito. You're an exception, perhaps, Kinsey, but in general, people are so overwhelmed by dukes and duchesses and sirs and ladies and Downton Abbey. I mean, it's in America these things sell.
Well, I think you will understand this because you were probably around my age when it was happening, but they're very, to me, Andrew and Fergie. Like, we will show up if the price is right. Harry did a real estate conference at a Toronto Hilton a few weeks ago and took pictures with strangers. So, yeah, I think to your point, they're commercial, they're mascots, they're shiny, but there's no depth, and they stand for absolutely nothing. And I do think that as in America, we're very much like, had a bad day, get over it. Tomorrow's going to be a better day. Work harder. You want more money? Work harder. You want to be liked more? Have a better attitude. And Harry and Meghan live in this perpetual victim mode that we're kind of over.
Well, I would like to think so.
Yeah.
But I'm always amazed how you've got a British accent and you can say I'm a lord or a lady or a royal highness or whatever, it's the Americans who are fawning over you, from the waiters to the president,
It's true.
rather than the Brits, who are perhaps more used to it as
Yeah.
part of their culture. And if Harry and Meghan, if the gloss is finally coming off, I think all the better, because like you, I'm pretty cynical about this whole brand.
Okay, so your verdict is Ravik might not go Harry's way. We'll have to wait and see. But you read those documents and their decision was fair to you. Is that correct? The ultimate decision?
Extremely fair. I mean,
Mhm.
they were saying, we're not going to give you a blanket yes or no and give you armed people, 12 of them because you think 12 are needed and so on. We're going to tailor it to your individual needs each time you come to Britain, and believe us, it will be adequate. We don't
Oh,
want a scandal on
Jonathan,
our watch.
Jonathan, I just remembered how Harry persuaded them to take another look.
Yes.
One of the last times he was there, a woman approached him twice and got very close to him. And so he went to Yvette Cooper and said, I had a stalker. And she got really close. And so that is why they decided that they would reevaluate it. Does that change your opinion at all?
They have always said, we're going to give you bespoke protection according to the needs of the particular visit and the circumstances you're in. And if there was such a stalker, well, obviously that's a new factor and precisely within what they promised the court they would do. So there's nothing new in this. They're just fulfilling what they said all along they would do, and very proper that they should. If he genuinely has a stalker, of course he needs more security and he'll get it. I
And
don't think
when
he'll go back to court to get it. I don't think he won't have to.
That's interesting. And with A&L, we're just going to have to put on our comfy socks and grab some popcorn because we've got at least another 8 weeks until we get close to the end. But then after that, we have to wait for the judge to sit down and actually physically put together what would I call that? A judgment?
Oh yes, it's a long written judgment, and the parties only get to see it 1 hour before you, the press and media, will see it. They don't know until an hour before which way it's going to go. So we must all, as you say, buy in a lot of popcorn. This one's not over until the fat lady sings.
Would you come back and react to the verdict or the judgment when it happens?
Oh, you mean you're inviting me?
Yes, of course.
With pleasure. How could I refuse such a wonderful invitation?
Jonathan Goldberg KC, the co-host of I Rest My Case. It's a brand new podcast available wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Can you give us a tease? Who are you going to be talking about in the future?
We've got, I think, 4 or 5 more episodes recorded. One is about the appalling Epstein case and all the spin-offs of that.
Wait, so will we get
Jeffrey
some Prince
Epstein.
Andrew gossip in that as well, or no?
There's more than a bit of Prince Andrew
Oh,
figuring in that
oh,
one, yes.
great. Absolutely. That my audience will love that. So that's something to look forward to.
Then we're taking a dive in the last century into really a wonderful trial, the trial of Oscar Wilde, the great author and socialite exposed as a homosexual in the days when it was illegal to be that. Then what else have we got? We're looking at the Kevin Spacey litigation. We go into that in depth. Then we've got the Rosenbergs. You remember the atomic spies? Not the greatest day of American justice, it has to be said. So we're talking about that trial, and indeed many others in the future, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, I am a fan. I subscribed. I've listened to all 3 episodes so far, and I love it. So you have a new fan in me, and hopefully my audience will head over in your direction. I Rest My Case is the title of your podcast, and you've been such a joy. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with me and tearing into Prince Harry with me today.
Absolutely my pleasure, Kinsey. You're questions, if I may respectfully say so, are not only very intelligent ones, but you've researched what's behind them very well.
Thank you, sir. Before I let you go, do you have any royal encounters? Have you ever
Yes.
met? Oh, can I hear them? These are my favorite stories.
Yes. Well, as a Queen's counsel, which I've been since, oh my God, since before Father Time, 1989, I became a Queen's counsel. When the Queen was, of course, the late great Queen Elizabeth, who never put a foot wrong in what 60-something years of reigning. Incredible story, you know. Actually, our queens have been far better than our kings, if I can just say that. I mean, when you think of Elizabeth I, perhaps the greatest of all, old Queen Bess, when you think of Queen Victoria, again, incredible, ascended the throne, I think, at the age of 17 and basically never put a foot wrong either. And then Queen Elizabeth. So our queens have been absolutely fantastic, haven't they? There was a bad one, Queen Anne. We don't talk about her so much. And there was another very bad one, Queen Mary, who cut an awful lot of people's heads off for not subscribing to the right religion, which in her view at the time was Roman Catholicism. However, I have had royal encounters. I've been lucky enough. I met the late Queen a few times, and what a great lady she was. You know, she had time for the lowest in the land as for the highest in the land. And that was very apparent, very sort of modest woman when you talk to her one-on-one. I've met Prince Charles, you won't believe this, but when we were both at Cambridge University, long before you were born, I sold him a rapid reading course. I was making a bit of money on the side as an impoverished student by selling the Evelyn Wood rapid reading course. It no longer exists. President Kennedy had taken it, and it was quite good for skim reading, you know, as a technique.
Yeah.
Somebody has an awful lot of reading to do and not too much time. And Prince Charles did my course. My company
That's so
was
great.
So pleased. Yes, I was great. My company was so happy with me that they paid me an enormous sum in those days. I bought my first car with the money I made from selling Prince Charles the rapid reading course.
That's
so
hilarious.
I met him on that occasion, or several occasions to arrange it. Princess Anne, I sat next to her at one particular charity dinner many years ago. Delightful woman to talk to. Wicked sense of humor. I mean, if I were to tell you I was pretty much a stranger to her, and if I were to tell you some of the things she said to me about the leading politicians of the day, including the then Prime Minister, probably your producers would pull the plug and we would go black on this channel. So yes, I've met several of them. Not Prince Andrew.
Yeah. Well, let's just make sure we get that disclaimer out of the way. But I'm so grateful that you spent your early morning with me. And I Rest My Case is the podcast that everybody needs to go subscribe to, listen to. A fascinating debate between you and Dean about America versus UK law and how things would have been translated differently if they would have happened on the other side. And just a great positive experience when I listened to the podcast. So congratulations on its success, and I look forward to more episodes.
Thank you, Kinsey, and how nice to talk to you.
Thank you.